Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm Glenn Martin here with my co-host James Haskell. In this episode, we're going to discuss the recent news surrounding some off-season programs for your Baltimore Ravens. But before we get into it, if you could take a second, give us a subscribe, give us a like, and we'll keep you up to date on all your Ravens news. But Jimbo, let the people know why we're here.
Yeah, we are here because the Ravens have joined a handful of other teams in letting us, the fans, know and the organization know that they're going to be opting out of OTAs. So I'm going to read the quote here. This is a statement on behalf of the Baltimore Ravens players. Our team leaders have discussed with each other, with our teammates, and with the NFLPA, and in solidarity with the other members of our union across the league. We have decided to exercise our CBA right not to attend in-person voluntary off-season workouts. So before we get into the meat of this conversation and what it really means for the team, I just kind of want to break down what this means. So and in a 4-week period, what's called phase 3 of the offseason program, you're able to have OTAs. In that period, you can have in that 4-week period, you can have 10 of them along with your mandatory veteran minicamp in that 4-week span. So the 10 organized team activities that can only be, if I'm not mistaken, 2 hours max, where they're together, are now off the table. So that doesn't mean they can't do it virtually, and it doesn't mean that mandatory veteran minicamp is off the table as well. We haven't gotten there yet. Hopefully we won't. But as far as those 10 organized team activities, where it's, you're looking at 20 hours worth of being together, no longer going to happen. So, Glenn, what do you think about it? What were your initial thoughts because we've seen other teams do it, but when you thought specifically about the Ravens, what were your initial thoughts?
Well, once I saw the other teams leaning in that direction, I'm not surprised to see the Ravens follow suit. But, I'll say this about the OTAs. I saw DeMar Smith, who's the head of the Players Association. He pointed out the fact that these are voluntary programs. Okay. They're not mandatory programs, but there's nothing really voluntary about them, because if you didn't show up, it was certainly a knock against you. I mean, even though they're labeled as voluntary workouts, if you didn't show up, coaches frowned upon that. I mean, they did not want to see, especially if you're a younger guy. Now, if you're a 10-year vet, maybe they would look the other way and not.
Yeah. Old Ray wasn't coming to these.
Right. And Sizzle wasn't showing up. There's no chance. But if you're a younger guy and you miss one of these, I mean, that's not good. I mean, that's going to impact, how much playing time you get, how many reps you get with the first teams for the mandatory stuff. So while it was listed as voluntary, it certainly was frowned upon if you missed it. So
yeah, the way the coach views you certainly is impacted, right?
Absolutely. And DeMar Smith actually has a quote here. See, I think, and this is his quote, I think what a lot of players have said that they've heard from their coaches is that they need to show up. We've known for years that this is a voluntary workout where a lot of coaches put their finger on the scale. And while they call it voluntary, they expect players to show up. And, so younger guys never wanted to say no to this. And honestly, these are mainly for the younger guys. It really benefits the younger guys more so than the veterans. And it impacts teams, especially if you have a new coaching staff and you're installing a new offensive or defensive system. Then certainly the earlier the coaches get you, in the room with them and get their hands on you and get you on the practice field, then the better as far as on the field, standpoint. As far as a football standpoint, the better your team will perform the more you have practice. So they said it voluntary, but clearly it was more than voluntary. It wasn't mandatory, but it was more than voluntary. So, it seems like veterans have been leading the charge of cutting down the offseason as much as they can. And I'm not sure if it's that or if it's truly, they still have to deal with all the protocols. They still have to get tested every day. They still have to wear their masks. They still have to do all the protocols. And maybe, they just grew tiresome. I mean, imagine being tested every single day where they got to stick that however long Q-tip all the way into your brain. I guess it just wore on some people. And look, they're still able to do these virtual meetings. And from the players' point of view, they say, we know how to keep ourselves in shape. We know how to keep ourselves ready. Um, and honestly, when it comes to mandatory mini camps and when it comes to the training camp, the biggest way to lose your spot or your spot on this roster is by getting hurt and by not being able to participate in the mandatory the times when everyone's on the field. So if they look at this as a way that they can minimize injury, minimize risk of catching COVID, which would force them to miss more mandatory time when the whole team is there, then I could see their point of view. But I could also see the point of view of the coaches that say the less of these these camps that you do, the less hardened the body is, the less prepared the body is for the rigorous practice sessions that are going to come later in the summer, and that this could actually lead to more injuries. So I do see it from both sides, but ultimately it's their choice. It is voluntary. They're finally finally flexing their muscle a little bit and showing that it's truly voluntary. But I'm certainly worried about certain players. I mean, here's who I worry about, Jimbo, and I'm going to let you jump in here on this because I want your take on this. Those players that are on the fringe of the roster, those guys that want to get in and get to the coaches and get with the workout pro and get familiar with the offense or the defense or whatever role they're playing, they're going to get impacted. I mean, the star players aren't going to get impacted. They're assured a role and a roster spot on this team. But those fringe guys, remember Gus the Bus, one of your favorites, that guy came in as an undrafted rookie free agent. There's no doubt that guys like him and other guys that are trying to fight their way on the team are going to get impacted by this. So what are your thoughts on the fact that now it's really not, they've canceled it. So even if a player wanted to come in and participate, it's no longer even an option, only the virtual stuff. So how do you think this could affect those fringe players that are fighting their way on the roster?
Yeah, I think it's really going to have, have a negative impact on those guys because sometimes it's just about FaceTime, right? You only get so many reps. A while ago, we had Evan, the agent, who's an NFL agent on, and he talks about, I think if I'm not mistaken, he has the most clients as far as volume of NFL guys that are on rosters that were not that were not invited to the combine.
Yep.
I thought that was a pretty interesting statistic because that seems to be his, the market that he succeeded with. And the reason I bring that up because he talked about telling his guys, look, Hall of Fame reps, right? Everything needs to be a Hall of Fame rep. So every single rep with these guys is high leverage, right? It's a high pressure moment. But now they get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Really, at this point, all you can do is show in your participation virtually, in your ability to pick up the offense or defense, special teams, whatever, that you're in it. And all these guys, I'm assuming you're going to be doing that, especially fringe guys. But yeah, I think it's going to have a negative impact on them. I also get concerned about the leap that we all take for granted between year 1 and year 2. I think all these veterans, I'm sensitive to the COVID issue, obviously, but all these veterans, maybe they don't look back or, it's easy to forget how benefited you were by those programs when you're 10 years in, right? And so maybe they aren't remembering exactly how much benefit they got from those moments in their career, right? Yeah. And so I do get concerned about that. I'm really nervous about this with the Ravens, maybe more than you, only because I don't know. It sounds like I was surprised because I thought you were going to be more nervous, but it seems like you're like, all right, like it's not the end of the world. The only reason I get nervous is because we are a young team. We draft really well. And so all the off-season program means so much more to us, to a team that depends so heavily on the draft. It's how we get so much of our talent. So that's my overarching concern. But you're making me feel a little better because it sounds like at least you're not crazy concerned about it.
Well, here's why I'm not that concerned. I feel like most teams, if not all, will follow suit and that this will be the norm around the league. Now, if it turns out that the Ravens are the only team, for instance, in their division that is skipping this, then I might be a little more concerned because that's 10 more 2-hour practices that the other teams in the division are going to take advantage of. And that's 20 hours on the field. That's a lot of time, that they could, at least in the initial part of the season, that it could benefit them. Maybe they're able to install one more little bit of the offense or defense, or maybe they're able to, do certain things that the Ravens will be just a little bit behind on. So I'm only encouraged that I think all the other teams will eventually follow suit, because I can't imagine, once they see other teams going around, that the players in those other teams aren't going to band together and follow suit and hold out as well, or express to the team that they won't be participating as well.
Well, we know the Browns will be opting out of this because now they have Jadeveon Clowney on their team. So we know that
Jadeveon, man.
We know that that's going to happen. I mean, certainly, right?
Yeah, I mean, look,
he's exercising all his voluntary rights.
He's
baby.
definitely not showing up. I think we know that. But yeah, so I'm not, and it's 10 practices, but in them 4 weeks, we will see still that mandatory minicamp.
Yeah,
Is that
at
correct?
least that hasn't been discussed so far, right? Okay. Now, my only concern, like you said, is that he also in part of his the video that's on here, DeMaurice Smith talked about how the COVID numbers are higher now than they were last March, and so there could be some discussion around the mandatory minicamp moving forward. We'll see, right? But it doesn't seem like it's been brought up yet. And we'll hope that things are under control, at least a little bit more under control by then.
Still got some time. So hopefully with the vaccines rolling out and becoming readily available to anyone, I think over the age of 16, maybe we'll see some headway in that direction. But, here's what I think is crazy is, Keith Williams gets hired as the wide receiver coach. This is a guy, who's so well respected. He's worked with other guys in the past. And now that he's on the team, he's not going to be able to work with these guys, individually, because he's a part of the organization. So I don't think, whereas before, if he still was not on the team, then they could have gone and used that time that they're now having off to work with their individual receiver coaches or individual coaches to whatever their position is. And now they can't work with the guy. And I think we all agree that that's probably the most important position going forward. Or the passing offense in general is the most important, development that we want to see this offseason.
D-Rob might be picking up some business.
That's right. Always open. Is that what it is?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting that I'm sure Greg Roman isn't thrilled of hearing this. I'm sure that Keith Williams and T. Martin, they're not thrilled hearing this because they wanted to get their hands on these young guys. They, most of these guys missed. Most of the guys on the roster missed the entire offseason last year. So, they want to get their hands on these young guys and start developing it and be able to, create this or improve this passing attack that was, pretty much dead last in the league. And now that's 10 less times that they can get on the field and start, expanding this passing offense. So I'm a little worried about certain positions. Obviously, offensive line is another position that it just takes work. It takes continuity. It takes getting out there and doing the reps. You can't emulate that stuff by looking at a screen. So the guys can keep themselves in shape, but they can't build the continuity and the camaraderie that you'd build on the field.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too is just jitters, right? For young guys, like get out there and just run around.
Yeah, hit somebody, get hit.
Well, there's no pads. But still, running around, make a catch, go up against some corners, and be in some one-on-one drills and stuff like that. Just
so you can hit a pad, right? You can hit a pad. You can hit a
okay. Exactly, right. And I also think that there's a visualization component to it, right? So, for example, a lot of people before they take a big standardized test will literally go in the previous week to the site, to the desk, sit down, because by the time they get there, it's not unfamiliar. So I think that's a big piece of it as far as taking advantage of what's to come, because when rubber hits the road, then you don't have those jitters anymore. You've been able to be there, feel it. You're exposed to it. So I think that's also going to set guys back in the same way that it did when we saw the ramp up with not having any preseason games, right? We kept forgetting, I feel like as fans, there was no preseason games last year. So Patrick Queen's first time making a tackle in the NFL was a literal game. Right. So,
that ramp up period is key because, Coach Harbaugh's talked about that's how he can't just throw guys into a regular practice. They need that time to get their bodies conditioned. Well, that's 10 less times that these guys can do that. So while they're citing, player safety and stuff like that, I understand when it comes to COVID, but we could see more injuries as a result of less practices. The body is just not used to doing the things that it's asked to do on an NFL practice field, and then all of a sudden you're thrust into it with the full complement of veterans and everyone. It's not like now. I do wonder.
We know John's not excited about it.
Oh no, John is not at all excited. He wants to see more practice time, and the fact that it's the contact between the coaches and I just don't. I just wish it was more. I guess the hard part is that you can call it voluntary all you want, but coaches can make a voluntary and they can let you know and stress the fact that it's voluntary, but we expect you to be here. So I do wish it was more of a voluntary thing, because I agree. I mean, veterans, they don't need it as much, but man, these young guys, I mean, if you're expecting to contribute on the field, we need to see you on the field. We just see you in the practice field getting this stuff done. So it'll be interesting to see how John balances the time that he now, less time he has. He's going to have to use those first few practices to get the guys ramped up and ready. I'm hopeful that guys come in shape, because we've seen in the past guys come in, they fail that conditioning test, which is, pretty stringent here. I mean, Jimmy, you know all too well about the conditioning test here in Baltimore. So, I mean, when the guys come in out of shape and they can't pass that test, that's one less day that they're on the field. Then they got to hope they pass it the following day, because coach isn't letting them on the field if they can't pass that test.
Yeah, and a lot of times I don't know what happens in a 24-hour period. It's like, if you ain't making it, it's probably going to be a couple days before you get them lungs ready and them legs ready to go. So it's going to be really interesting. I hope that, what I have faith in is, and I'm sure you do as well, is that the team will be as creative and exhaustive in all of their resources as possible to compensate for this loss. But I'm sure the coaching staff is not super excited about it. But we want to know what you guys think. Mm-hmm. Do you see there being a big impact and a more specific impact on the Ravens in comparison to other teams based on their age? Where are you at on this? And give us all your thoughts about the Ravens opting out of OTAs, and we will talk to you guys soon.